Hi, I'm Warren Zenna, founder and CEO of the CRO Collective, and welcome to the CRO Spotlight podcast. This show is focused exclusively on the success of chief revenue officers. Each week, we have an open, frank, and free-form conversation with top experts in the revenue space about the CRO role and its critical impact on B2B businesses. This podcast is the place to be for CROs, sales and marketing leaders who aspire to become CROs, and founders who are looking to appoint a CRO or want to support their CRO to succeed. Thanks for listening. Now let's go mix it up. Hi, welcome to this episode of the CRO Spotlight podcast. This is Warren Zenna, the founder of the CRO Collective, and lots going on here. Really excited about a number of things we're working on. We just had another great New York City event. I got one coming up in Chicago on November 19th, so I really would love it if everybody could come. Anyone in the Chicago area that wants to be part of one of these events, just throw me a note, LinkedIn, or email me, and I'll get you involved. But today I want to talk about programmatic advertising and marketing. Christian Gerron is the chief revenue officer of StackAdapt, and he asked to be on the show because I think that they've got a great offering, and I thought it would be a really good opportunity to speak to him because it looks like Christian is really in a great position there, and he's set up pretty well. It's a good example of an organization that's implemented the chief revenue officer role properly. So we had a really great conversation. I think you'll enjoy it. So stay tuned. Okay, Christian, I really appreciate you being here. If maybe you saw, the core of my background is in ad tech. I was at Publicis for 4 years. I was ran one of the groups at Havas, so I'm very familiar with your company and what you guys do. So we can have a pretty detailed conversation. But thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, excited to be here. It's a fun space. I've been in digital media for a long time, so it's a fun and always evolving space. And I think advertising is one of those industries that has a lot of durability. It's been around forever. It just kind of changes and shapes the way it looks, but I think you're going to need it going forward forever.
No question. I mean, it's to talk about that, because I've been out of it for a while. I left. I think my last tour of duty in that space was in 2018. It's almost like when Lincoln was president, Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm just curious, like how the industry is changing now that, aside from the obvious, stuff that's going on in terms of moving things around and, larger organizations taking over bigger pieces of the pie and all the other things like that. But even with AI, I'm just kind of curious, like, how are you guys moving towards adapting to that, particularly when you're looking at the Trade Desk and Google and Amazon, trying to drag everything into the fray? What's the strategy that StackAdapt is using to maintain a footing on the marketplace?
Yeah, I think if you look at, to your point, it's evolved a ton, and as a result of that, you're probably familiar with like the Lumascape slides that show all the players and intermediaries, and that thing just continues to grow. I mean, there's over 15,000 players insane in the game, which makes it really, really hard, right? If you're a marketer, end of the day, the simple thing you're trying to do as marketers, grow a business, right? Yep. Acquire new customers, get more out of your existing customers, and I think with good intention, the industry has built a lot of new capabilities, but that fragmentation is real. And if you're a marketer,
it's huge. Yeah.
Staying on top of it's really, really tough. And the amount of level of effort you have to start to expend to get the ROI you want starts to change. And just the complexity and the amount of education that you need to have and capacity just to understand all the different platforms and what you're trying to do gets pretty tricky. And we really focus on how do you start to reduce that level of effort for the marketer while increasing that ROI? How do you make it easier for them to do that? And we think more about the operating system we're building. While a lot of people think of us as a DSP, we're more than that in what we do. And we've really started to bring, even this last year, announced how we do bring kind of your owned media through MarTech, your email channels, direct mail, your first party data integrations and programmatic, and bring those things together with measurement, with insights, with intelligence, so that it just starts to increase performance, most importantly, but with a lower level of effort to do that, and lower cognitive load. And how do you scale those things in a way where you're not trying to live across multiple different ecosystems and can do that all within our platform to a large degree? I think that the challenge you have, as you think about, at least for the few decades I've been in it, You went from direct buying with publishers, one-to-one to your ESPNs or your Yahoos, your MSNs or whatever. Then you kind of went to the ad networks that had some aggregation. And then you went to programmatic, or the early stages of programmatic, which would start to meant to simplify some of that buying ecosystem. But then all these walled gardens started to appear again, of these behemoth players that have very large audiences, and the fracturing almost came back again, and then curation. So it goes through these ups and downs in the cycle of where you create benefit for the marketer and then you create new complexity. And we're really trying to remove a lot of that complexity for the marketer to go into one platform, leverage their investment in their first party data to get more out of it. How do you get more intelligence out of each of your customers, what they're doing, your prospective customers? How do you find them in the right place? How do you make sure you deliver that right message at the right time? Then how do you measure it back? Because there's the digital footprints, but there's the physical footprints as well. In the different verticals, it's also different, whether you're in healthcare versus B2B segment, very long cycles. It's a whole different way to measure. So you have to make sure you build. We're trying to be focused on is depth and breadth, meaning don't just have kind of a one size fits all, but have really point solutions for healthcare, for travel. For example, if you're a travel DMO, you care about the impact you're having in your community. So how do you measure the spend coming into your community, through credit card transactions and other things to know, like, is that marketing really working? Are you bringing new customers, new travelers into your market? Are you benefiting all those that you serve in that community? So each solution gets quite different, but we're trying to invest to make sure we have those point solutions within the platform.
It makes sense. And, it's an increasingly cutthroat space. So as a chief revenue officer, a couple of things I want to get into with you is one is just bit of your background, like how you evolved into the CRO role and how the role is being deployed at StackAdapt. Like what is the scope of your role? And then lastly, at least for this segment of the conversation, is also where are the go-to-market challenges and opportunities that you're seeing right now? How are you actually deploying go-to-market solutions to accommodate for some of the things that you just mentioned to me?
Yeah. I think to me, the way I think of the CRO role is it's not a super seller role, it's an operator role. I think there's different flavors of CROs at different companies, and titles can be what they will, but you're really trying to build the machine to go faster and bring all those components together. And my background, maybe just to kind of touch on that as just how I got here, is I actually started my career in finance and not sales, which was kind of the atypical move. Like going from finance to sales is a story.
So were you a CFO?
No, I was an analyst. Early in my career, I was at Microsoft as a financial analyst, supporting the ad revenue organization, and learning a lot about the business, learning around the operational metrics to run a business. And so it gave me a lot of great education on what are those things that executives look at, how a business runs, and also a lot of data and analytics skills. So when I first became a seller, especially in the early days when I was selling search and other things, like we use that data to talk to customers about how to get better ROI and understand it better. Because the data part was missing in the early parts of the advertising game. It was always about reach and frequency and other pieces. Really try to showing back, attribution metrics. And so I started my career in finance, and after a long and persistent push with some of my sales leaders I supported, they gave me a chance to become a seller, and worked my way through that. Sold in SMB, sold in mid-market, sold to enterprise brands like Nike and Procter & Gamble and some of the big agencies. And then actually I went back after I helped build out our first inside sales and mid-market team. I went back to an operator role, and I ran US ad operations at Microsoft, where I got to learn a lot about organizational design, doing all the fun mid-year reviews and QBRs that the Microsoft way, and kind of that operational rigor that you needed in your business to run it, and how to make those decisions for headcount, investments, et cetera. And then I went back into sales leadership again, and worked in a variety of those different capacities at Microsoft before actually switching industries, leaving media for a bit and going into the travel space, where it was for about 7 years. And I spent time actually completely out of the ad business for a while, building technology partnerships for the Marriotts, the Deltas, Amex, Chase Bank, building their travel websites, their loyalty programs, and also ran publisher media, in the end there in the affiliate business before I became a StackAdapt. But I share that because all those things, I was even running product in Ninja at a point there. It gave me a lot of experiences wearing a lot of different hats, and how do you bring the whole business together to make it go faster? And I think that's really, the job of the chief revenue chief revenue officer is how do you build the machine to go faster? The revenue org is a connected ecosystem. It has sales, it has services, it has data analytics, compensation, BI, RevOps, customer service, all those different pieces. How do you bring that together to work more efficiently? And at StackAdapt, my role oversee over 800 people this next year. That includes all sales motions, and we're segmented by different parts of the market. We're going after all client service motions, analytics, BI, compensation, deal desk, the enablement teams, kind of the whole thing. The only thing that doesn't directly roll into my organization is marketing, is a partner organization that we work with. So it allows me to kind of oversee the whole thing and make sure that you can make those right trade-off decisions quickly as you build the business and not have the risk of silos of, protectionism and things to go with the wrong speed. But really, we've built it to go as fast as we can.
Amazing. So a couple of questions about this. This is cool. So, you went from finance, and it sounds to me like you wanted to be in sales. Was it because you wanted to make more money? Like, what was the attractive thing about being a salesperson?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. What I think I've enjoyed most about sales is just being a curious kind of person. Like, you get to learn about a lot of different business models, because as a seller, if you want to be effective, you need to understand what drives each of those businesses. So you get more well-rounded quickly as a business leader and operator, and understand what does it take to make Nike tick versus Procter and Gamble versus an SMB brand, right? What are those things they're trying to drive? So you get to learn about a lot of different businesses. I think that's the part I've always loved the most. I also love the fact, your impact's pretty black and white. It's pretty tangible. Are you being effective or not? Not that other roles don't, but they're probably sometimes harder to show the tangibility.
Definitely easier to measure success of a sales.
Yeah, easier to measure, right? Versus when I was in finance, right, it was always the seller's like, can you just go back and lower my quota, increase my T&E for me, please, right? And you'd work your butt off to do those things, but sometimes more thankless on any given day. But I learned a lot in that. So I think what drove me to sales was that curiosity, learning about the businesses, and being close to the customer, like what actually matters to them. You learn a lot when you're in an internal org, understanding what makes the customer tick hard. And I think no matter what role you ever go back into, even if you're not in a customer facing role, you can be more effective in those roles by actually understanding the customers that you serve and what it takes to make them more effective in how you deliver for them. So I've enjoyed that. Obviously, it's great if you're successful, you might make a little bit more compensation, but I've moved in and out of sales roles multiple times, and that's not always the driver for me.
What is the driver for you?
It's being able to run fast and have ownership on something that I can drive, impact on. I think one of the reasons I left big corporate after a couple of decades in it is I spent an inordinate amount of time on things that didn't drive real business impact. And, I'm kind of an all in or all out guy. And if I got parachutes in my back and blocks in my feet to try to get the job done, there was times where, running 150 million plus OpEx and multi-billion P&L, and it's like, I got to ask permission to have a $3,000 pay raise for somebody. Like, fire me if I'm not doing the job, not delivering, but make sure I have the empowerment to be successful in the role that the company's asked of me. And I think for me, what really drives me is people that have amazing will and conviction and, that contagious positivity, which I found in just spades at StackAdapt. That's what really drove me in here in the first place, that want to go win and want to, serve their customers and not be, I think complacency kills, and that probably kills me as most soul sucking. So being in an environment where there's just an amazing amount of bold ambition to go get what's next and to run like heck going after it and not being just, afraid to go make big, bold decisions on those things.
Thank you so much again for listening to the CRO Spotlight podcast. This podcast is an important plank in the CRO Collective communication strategy, and we're really thrilled to have such great guests on here. So listening and sharing the podcast with other people is really vital, because we want to get as many people listening to this great stuff as possible. A couple of things to note. If you're a aspiring CRO or a recently hired CRO, or even an old salty CRO, and you're looking to either become a chief revenue officer or improve your chops and gain some more insights and improve your competencies as a chief revenue officer, we offer the CRO Accelerator course. It's 5 years now. It's the first CRO-focused course that was out there. It's a 15-week course that is populated by aspiring chief revenue officers and CROs. We're pretty selective in terms of who can be a member of the CRO Accelerator course. It's people who are probably more ready to be a CRO right now. They have a number of years under their belt as a revenue leader, whether it be a sales leader or a marketing leader or even a RevOps leader. And they either want to move into the C-suite, or they're CROs that want to just make sure that they win in the role. So if you are interested in being a member of the next cohort, please just write me a note on LinkedIn. Just DM me, CRO Accelerator, and we'll set up a time to talk. And then I can send you more information to give you a brochure of the course. So again, CRO Accelerator course, 15-week program for aspiring and newly hired CROs. Take advantage of it. It's been great. And you'll see some more information about it on the website. Thanks. Yeah, it's interesting because I made a post about this about 3 or 4 months ago. I work with, hundreds of CROs now. I work with them very closely, some of them whom are getting into their first roles, or like yourself, have had many. And, what I was saying is that, surprisingly, I ask every CRO that I work with, why they want this job, because it's kind of nuts,
Yeah, it's busy.
And, they never say money. I never heard one say, oh, I want to make more money. They all say exactly what you did. They're saying, I'm at a point right now where I know what needs to be done, and I want the authority to do it because I'm tired of being at the effect of decisions that don't make any sense. And I think it's the sort of silo disease that happens with organizations is, when organizations are not, in my opinion, mature enough or don't have the awareness enough to bring on a CRO in the capacity that you're describing, which I, advocate for, obviously, in my business. They end up with just a bunch of different organizations in one organization, and everybody feels they're stuck in a silo. And it's a soul-sucking, difficult way to work when, you're in a marketing org or a sales org or wherever it might be, and you're just at the effect of a committee that really isn't really a machine. And I think the machinery building is a unique skill. I mean, you need people who know how to do a lot of different things. People who are good CROs have a very unique skill stack. And I think it's changing. That's why I asked you the questions before, because I'm noticing a lot more people become CROs from different avenues than before. Even 4 or 5 years ago when I started this business, every CRO was a salesperson. Everyone. I mean, they didn't do anything else. They just ran sales organizations. But I'm seeing more people like yourself that have finance skills, which doesn't surprise me at all. I think it would be very attractive to hire a chief revenue officer that ran finance, because the obvious analytical brain that must require, number one. And number two is just having business acumen around how money is spent and, P&Ls. It brings a whole different way in which looking not just at financial data, but data itself. Just how do we deploy things and what works, what doesn't work. So I could see why, you'd make a good, well-rounded person for this, and, good for your company for being able to know how to give you what I call the authority, autonomy, resources, and runway to do the job properly. And that's what you want, and the right person with those powers can do amazing things, but I don't see it a lot. So why do you think it is to that point that StackAdapt sort of understands this and deployed you properly? What makes your organization unique in the respect that most, frankly, companies I work with don't deploy their CROs this way? They're keeping them sort of relegated to a silo.
Yeah, it's a good question. And, I don't know if it's because we're founder led and the growth, bold ambitions we have, but, they probably had to have a lot of mental models on what it should be from other places, as they grew up and built this company here largely for most of their career. And I think they saw that their goal was, how do you make the revenue organization as effective with customers as fast as possible? And we're ones where we try to decentralize things. We don't want a huge C-suite of people, we don't want politics. We have a ton of values that we want to make sure, don't interject into the space. And when we hire, it's really important. Every hire I make, you have to have obviously amazing functional competency, but, really try to sniff out those politics players, because they really exist. And it's, are you all in? I don't care if my team's 20 people or 2,000 people. It's what's the job, needing me to get done. And I think that they know that the revenue organization is this connected ecosystem of sales and client services and the enablement, all that working together. And what's the benefit of breaking it apart? It's just more for the CEO or somebody else to manage, and then more, connective tissue for them to have to gain. I can deflect a lot of that. I don't want to call it noise, but just focus for our CEO, to let them focus on things that matter more to the company, right? We always ask ourselves, what's going to help make the boat go faster? And if something's slowing it down, why interject it into the machine? Constantly look for ways to take out friction. And I think I was one of the first external hires in our leadership group, and I think they wanted to find somebody that could bring it in and stitch it all together and have that operational know-how, and not just, again, if I got to be in the room selling, we've got the wrong model, right? And I love to do that and be part of the team, but my job is really about how do I build the organizational design and bring in the right talent and have the right focus areas for what we do to make sure I can remove that friction in the sales system. If I'm in the room every day, like I'm probably not enabling the org to move fast enough. Like that's where I need to spend most of my time.
Gotcha. So I'm curious now, like given that fact that you've been given the keys to the engine and you're building it based on my very deep understanding of the industry that you're in and how mercurial it is and how much it's moving. What are some of the go-to-market strategies that you're deploying to make sure what's the kind of changes, what's working, what's not, about what you're doing right now to make sure that you maintain market share in such a cutthroat and, frankly, if you probably would agree, commoditized space, right? Where there's, the differentiators between a lot of the different options for what you do are not that different. Sometimes it's just name branding. I just rather work with the trade desk. I like
That's right.
them, or I'd rather work with Google because I already have a Google, relationship. What are you doing to keep yourselves competitive more on a operational perspective that you've done that work across your organization right now?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, we always try to look customer backwards in terms of what's the job to get done, like what problem do you have to go and solve? And it does vary in the ad tech space. The way you service an enterprise customer versus a mid-market customer, or an agency versus a brand, or even internationally, it varies a lot. Like you go into Japan is very different than what you do in the US, for example. And so I'm really trying to make sure when I got here, we've done a lot, I would say, a pretty big remodel of the house and how it was set up. Like literally day one, when I got here, we had over 100 reps in the US. They could all call New York if they wanted to, right? And that's probably what they're going to go do where the money
Of course,
is.
if I could call New York,
guess what?
I will call New York. Yeah, right to help. Yeah.
Without any segmentation principles or focus, you're not going to build an efficient growth machine for the long term. And one of the first things we had to do is just think about how do we want to segment our business to go after the market, and then what types of go-to-market deployment do you need to have behind that? And where we built our business, we're seeing tremendous success and continue to grow is in the mid-market segment. It was in the programmatic space, probably the most underserved part of the market. And if you think about the big players, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Googles, the Trade Desk, the Yahoos, et cetera, like they weren't focusing in that segment. And if you think about on the customer side, if you're an agency holding company, you have armies of programmatic teams and buyers, or if you're a very large enterprise brand that are building this stuff, if you're an independent agency of 30, 40, 50 people, you're trying to run social, you're trying to run search, you're trying to run programmatic, you're trying to run linear, like you're trying to do a lot with a very limited resource. And their knowledge base of all those sometimes was very surface level, and especially programmatic. And what they really needed was just help and support. Like, how do we do this? And there's two ways. Obviously, we want to focus on. One is a platform that really delivers. Most importantly, like, you can have the best service team in the world, but if your platform doesn't deliver, it's kind of irrelevant. But build best-in-class technology and innovation that is really customer-driven. We have customer advisory boards where product teams that are meeting with their clients all the time, and we build so much of a roadmap based on customer feedback and the gaps they have. But then we wrap that with a really good go-to-market sales motion, which is not just the seller, but the account manager, the data and analytics. We have a creative studio team in-house. I mean, a lot of these agencies or brands, when they're not the big brands, they would love to run CTV or digital at home, but they don't have the resources to do it. Like, let's close that gap. They don't know how to trade programmatically. Let us do it for you. We can do it managed service for you. So there's things that we try to look at. What are those customer needs? And we solve those very well and continue to grow on it. And then it was like that next double click in, which is, hey, I'm a healthcare customer versus a travel versus a B2B. Let's make sure we can give you a solution that works for you. I think what we found is they were able to grow and retain their clients better as agencies, which just made them more successful as companies and made them want to lean into our partnership more. We've literally had many agency partners come to us and say, you helped build my business, or you saved my business, which is an amazing thing to hear, in this space. Here's trying to figure out, purpose, but you do really serve a purpose to grow this. Versus enterprise is a very different motion. The way you entertain, the way you engage, the legal process, the contracting process, much more complex, a much longer sales cycle. So we want to make sure you have the right kinds of sellers on that motion, global agency development teams that are working with the heads of investment at those companies, very, very different sales motions, and then we even have kind of more, say, inside sales and brand direct motions as well. What you asked, like, what wasn't working? I would say there's a few things. One is, as our business has grown, we've been growing tremendously. As an AE or account executive's book continues to get bigger, their so-called existing business, their focus just always goes to that naturally, and their muscle to go close new business can either atrophy or just get distracted. And sometimes you have sellers of different profiles. You have some sellers that are good at new business and some that are good at existing. You kind of have the hunters and farmers. Some can do both, but what I found, managing thousands of sellers over time is you sometimes have specialists in that, like people that love to chase and love to hunt, and those that love to grow. And we're actually segmenting our teams a little bit more in that regard to make sure you can, because as a company, we have both objectives: grow your established customer base, but go acquire more logos. And what we're finding, you can try to change incentives all you want, but the mix makes it hard. You have to have dedicated motions in some of those things. So at different levels, we are segmenting differently around those things. You got to change the comp plans for all that. You have to think about your enablement strategy for each of those differently. You got to think about your marketing motions for each of those things. The way we go to market with enterprise, and showing up to Cannes or something is very different than how we host our own private events with the mid-market kind of customers. So there's a lot that we have to change in those. And I think that was probably what was not working enough is, and there's no segmentation when I got here. As I've moved everybody, the first thing we did in the mid-market was we re-regionalized. At the agency level, you're still kind of a generalist versus a specialist vertical selling motion. And what we saw, just after 2 years of doing that, our 15 smallest states grew like 500%. Because guess what? When you put somebody with a purpose to just go open that state, they figure out how to do it. If you let them have too much choice for the job to be done, they'll go to the lowest hanging fruit. So by creating focus on the job to be done, we're actually accelerating results. And then as we go into brand, we know that you can be more effective when you're talking to a brand if you really know their vertical really well, because you're going to sell the right solution. So like, put that as a job to be get done. If you're in the e-commerce team, go sell e-commerce and retail. Don't try to fill up your brain with the travel solutions, the healthcare solutions, although it's the cognitive overload is too much. So that, wasn't working. And probably the other really big change we've had to make since I got here is I had to reset my leadership team, which is always tough decisions. I got a lot of great will and great people at StackAdapt, which is why we all love working here. But as you grow really fast, you got to make sure the readiness level is there for everybody at the right time. And worst thing you can do is put somebody in a role where they're not ready to go forward, because it's not good for them or good for the business. And so we had to make some moves there, and I've rebuilt the leadership team. And then we brought in a lot of great talent to complement our existing talent. And you can see the impact on that quite quickly when you bring in the right people. So talent development is probably always the number one thing in my mind, and talent attraction, because without that, it's going to be really hard to go execute and what you want to go do.
How do you know, like, have you gotten to the point yet now where you have a good sort of codified type of competencies you're looking for and the profiles? What's the way that you analyze bringing people on? Because I know how hard it is to have to remove people from the roster when they've been around for a while. And I understand you have to, but then you don't want to go through that again. So you want to make sure that you're bringing on people and you have a process to determine as best as you can that they're the right fit. What's the way that you identify new people, and what's the diagnostic you use to determine that they're a good fit for the organization?
Yeah, it's obviously varies by role, like a leader versus an AE, right? If you're talking to an AE, are they a hunter or are they going to be a farmer? Because if they're a hunter, you're really trying to look at their grit and resilience and test for, like, how have they broken through when they've gotten rejection, multiple times? How do they find a way to differentiate themselves from the 500 other sellers showing up at the door every day to get the customer to lean in and want to have that conversation? So, try to probe them a lot. How do they have that curiosity and instinct in ways to, push through it? Do they know how to make deals bigger? Do they know how to do the discovery the right way? Do they know how to prospect? All those kind of, I would say, table stakes things. As you go up to, like, when I hire in VPs and above, I look at a couple of things. Like, one, trying to test for their business acumen and how they think about their go-to-market strategy, how they think about the competition, how they think about differentiation. Where have they designed and brought new organizations to light? Where have they worked collaboratively with product teams to bring new product to market that something they identified or was customer driven? Like, do they know how to go work cross functionally? Do they know how to work with marketing to have the right events and messaging to the customer? Do they know how to build enablement programs, that how to scale, how to identify where the needs are within that enablement? Do they have experience doing large scale change transformation? Do they know, like, what does it mean when you're making really big organizational design changes or standing up new teams? What is their go-to-market motion? Do they have the right prioritization on how they go and build and their kind of playbook for setting up a new team? And I'll go through, a bunch of questions with them on that stuff. Operational rigor and the rhythm of business, I'll really quiz them on, like, walk me through a week, a month, a quarter, like, how you're running your business. What are the checkpoints? How are you holding accountability with the teams? How are you making sure you have the right leading indicators early to know, what's on track, what's going well, that you know when to double down, and when did you do that? Or where would you have those signals that things were maybe going sideways, and did you iterate or know when to pull the eject button, equally as well, like when to say stop? So I think for each of those roles, it's trying to make sure you're curated to those things, and how do you validate their true knowledge base and those competencies too. They just leadership and how they show up. I always try to throw in a few questions sometimes too, to see like what may show up in those answers they give you around, perceptions of them, their strengths, but also misperceptions of the individuals. Cause sometimes you learn something interesting in there about their personalities. And as mentioned earlier, to me, what our magic at StackAdapt is our culture right now, and is the sense of complete buy-in to what we're doing, and not letting the politics enter the space, and try to like sniff out who might bring that to the table and who might not. It's a culture of humility and no egos is what we really try to push. In ad tech, there's plenty of those to go around, and we want to make sure that we have one of our values is we win together. We act like underdogs. Those are things that do really matter in how we show up. And there is zero space, even with my own teams. Like, this is important within revenue. When you have multiple sales channels, there's shades of gray between, or segments between, enterprise and what's mid-market, right? Like, how do you define that? There's ways you try to, but sellers are going to try to find dollars. And you see this butting of heads. And I've been in many organizations where the biggest competition is inside your walls versus outside your walls. And, I always tell my leaders, like, you have to think about what is best for the customer and for the company, and be ready to, like, if you can't defend the decision you want to make to our board, like, why are you bringing it to me? Like, think through what you're trying to do. And usually the driver of most of those conflicts is who's getting the commission check on which quarter, which is super short-sighted. Yep. I can fix commission checks and revenue, like, fairness very easily. But what my team knows I have a zero tolerance policy for infighting and channel conflict. Like, figure it out, or somebody's going to be out, right? Like, and this day, like, they're going in on pitches together, and working things, and like the friendship and camaraderie that's created, and the sense of trust between our team is like, I would have everybody over my leadership team for dinner and just enjoy it as a good time, even if I wasn't working there anymore. And I don't think I've had that in other places where there is always somebody empire building, or like got a hidden agenda. And we're pushing that stuff out, and it matters, because you can go so much faster when you have trust, and you can have open conversations. Like, we'll debate, like, no doubt about that, but in a really productive way, where nobody's holding back. It's more of a positive debate.
Thanks again for listening to the CRO Spotlight podcast. We're excited about all the great guests we have, and more importantly, we're excited mostly about you for being avid listeners and supporting the work that we do here. Feel free, please, to share the CRO Spotlight podcast with any of your colleagues. We just think there's a great wealth of information here, and we want to get the word out to as many people as possible. And your support of the show is really appreciated. I wanted to share information about a program that we offer called the CRO Masters Council. The CRO Masters Council is a bi-monthly group of 6 seasoned chief revenue officers who are looking for a chief revenue officer board of directors, so to speak, that they could share what's going on with them, collaborate with ideas, get some feedback on what's going on in their current role. And these are great conversations. I facilitate them. The CRO Masters Councils, again, they're twice a month, and they last for at least 6 months to a year. So if you're interested in having your own CRO suite, your own board of directors of chief revenue officers, it's a private, confidential conversation that we have. It's infinitely useful. Imagine having a room full of other chief revenue officers you can talk to and say, hey, I'm working on this, or have you guys figured that out? Or I'm having this issue right now with my business or my results. these are just invaluable conversations with chief revenue officers. Chief revenue officers have a very, very unique role. It's a very lonely job, and only other CROs understand what you're going through. So that's why we created this program. So if you're interested in being a member of the next CRO Masters Council, which we have a number of them being put together right now, just go to my LinkedIn and DM me Masters or Masters Council, and I'll follow up with you and set up a call or send you some more information about it. Looking forward to seeing you there, and thank you. Great. So I'm curious about something. What do you find is more of an indicator of success for you? I know it's kind of a broad question, but it's something that comes up a lot, is industry expertise or just general competencies?
Yeah, we do debate this one a lot, especially as we go from new sellers. And
I know your space. It's pretty nuanced. You want people to know a lot. There's a lot of detail to it. So I don't want to say that I would necessarily expect anybody to completely issue industry expertise, but I've seen a lot of instances where you'll bring people in from some completely different place and they just have the right qualities and they make it work and they become superstars. And sometimes we overhire people that come from our space and they're not that good, For example, if I worked at Amazon or Google, I'm going to sit there all day and field deals. It's not that difficult to succeed there, So it's not an indicator of anything. And in many cases too, we have this happen a lot on our side. I happen to have an agency, and we find that when our clients bring in people that they hired from, Salesforce or some big company, that they tend to not be very good at what they do because they enjoyed an environment where they just sat around and they made money all day long. It's usually the people that had to suffer through things, and like you and I had to sweat equity, do things. They're the ones who are adaptable and they can bring those competencies anywhere. And it's a conversation I have a lot with my clients about whether or not they're missing out on talent because they need people that came from, Google or another one of your other ad tech competitors, or even the space in general.
Yeah, it's a really good question in the sense that, to me, I always make sure they have the right values first. Like functional competency, if you don't show up and operate the right way, like I know some really great sellers, and I actually saw this in my team years ago, that created a toxic environment around them, and that whole pod kind of shut
Poison.
down. And when that individual left, and this was back when I was in office, years and years ago, you just saw the whole corner of that building change ignite. I was like, wow,
absolutely.
This person was beating quota every period, and we thought they were the best seller, but they were really dragging down the team. So you got to make sure that's not there. Depending on functional competency, I would say it depends on the maturity of the team and where you need to go fast, and how the size and scale of the team. Because even digital advertising experience is not programmatic experience. We have many digital sellers that have come to us from some of the walled gardens that could be on the social side. And it's a steep learning curve to go in and talk shop, with programmatic. So it kind of depends on who's your customer and what level of depth of knowledge does that specific role need to have from programmatic and their buyers, and how sophisticated are they versus others that your sales team might be able to come in with less, programmatic competency, but you have digital and you can talk the talk and you can dive in and learn pretty quick. Programmatic's not rocket science, but it's complex to learn the vernacular of it. So what we have on the seller side, if you go into a hunter role where they're not going to maybe be the ones growing and in the account day to day after it gets closed, I've seen some that come from out of industry that have actually learned and ramped. They know how to get people on the phone. They know how to get to those first meetings. But if they had to go grow and ramp it would probably be more concerning. If you're somebody that's going to be on a really critical account, that knowledge base is going to be more important. So I would say it's a mix. And then you got to feel what kind of fast start you need in that team. We have some teams we're building right now, we need fast starts. We need people that have the right Rolodex and they know how to talk shop day one and can go in and do it. I think as you look though, even outside of revenue in particular, whether it's a RevOps team, an enablement team, a finance team, a marketing team, the digital or kind of functional competency is a little bit less important, and mastery of your craft is more important. Our CMO, for example, doesn't come from the digital space, but as a CMO, he's familiar with it because he's had to buy marketing.
Yeah.
But he really knows how to be creative and scrappy and how to create impact at customer events and how to talk to customers. And so I think it's less important there. At even the senior leadership levels, I would say it becomes a little bit less important there because you're trying to figure out how do you build the operational machinery to work together, move fast, and you can spot trends in your playbooks to work and see how is the organization working together. So at the seller and service, I should say it does sort of depend on the job to get done, the sophistication of which segment you're selling into, and then how many other people on that team have that expertise. And if you have a strong team that's got a lot of it, but this person brings in a new kind of expertise, like let's just say it was B2B, like maybe you weren't selling programmatic, but you were selling B2B solutions into marketers. Well, you probably actually know some things that the rest of this team doesn't know. And so it can be complementary. So I try to have a mix, and it really depends on where that team is at. But if you have too many of one or the other, you probably create some gaps and less synergy.
Yep, that's great. I tend to believe that great people who work at companies come with a core set of competencies that are sort of immutably across whatever they do. They bring it, and then you teach them the business on top of those things. But the other side around, it doesn't work. You need those core competencies just as an inherent part of their nature, and then you can just teach them how to do your business, right?
I think that's right. We saw like in our RevOps team, we completely rebuilt, and most of those didn't come from the industry, but they're really good analytical minds. They're very curious. They can start to connect dots and ask questions, and then they can learn the business, quickly. And for those roles, like you don't need to know how a travel solution works in programmatic. You need to understand the go-to-market motion at a very high level and what that job is to get done for the sellers and start to look at metrics the right way. So I think it varies by role.
So we're getting close to time. I want to make sure I address an important couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
So two things, you can just kind of lump them together. One is for listeners, what would you advise chief revenue officers who are taking the job for the first time right now and the sort of things they should be thinking about? And the second part is, if a company is looking to hire one, what should they be thinking about right now?
Yeah, I think, if for the one that for somebody going into the role, again, I always say talent's first. You got to set up the right functional design to go to market based on the customer needs and what you want to capture. Make sure you've organized the team. I think some people often try to organize around people versus organize around the needs of the business and the needs of the customer. And I actually recommended firing myself in a previous job because I saw the org changing a certain way. And my boss, I think my team should fold in. And you have to be willing to say that and say what's best for the business. Be willing to fire yourself. And if you're good, you'll always find a home. And I did, but we actually ended up folding my old mid-market organization into the enterprise function just because the way that the job was evolving. But my point, there's always think from a blank sheet of paper. Don't let old mental models lock you, or if you design around an individual, individuals aren't going to say it to you forever. Then you have a bigger thing to overhaul later. Make sure you have the right talent in each of those seats, is the most important. And I'm sure everybody's seen those when you have the wrong person in the role and you put the right person in, how much faster things get done, how much of your time is saved because you can lean into your leaders. And as a CRO, when you're juggling multiple different functions, you have to have immense trust in the skill set of your team and empower them to go make decisions every single day. And if you have to over-index and over-rotate into what they're doing on their job, the boat's not going faster, right? So you got to make sure talent, I think, is always first. Right design, right people in the right roles. Prioritization is, it kind of sounds basic, but it's easy when you get a lot of smart people to come up with a lot of ideas. We were just going through this myself, they're planning, and it's wow, there's so much we want to go do. But what really matters most, and what are those sacred programs or projects that must get done that are really going to have step change growth? Have a really clear plan of priorities, make sure everybody ladders and understands their role in those, and help them understand where to say no or stop doing things. You gotta build that stuff out. That operational rigor and excellence as a CRO is critical. You can't invest in your business going forward or run it the right way if you are blind to how it's operating underneath. You have to have that great RevOps team and sales ops team, deal desk, for commercial models, whatever those components are you need for your business, so that the machine can go faster. Because if you're not, you're just going to get slowed down, and you can't have these functions where the gears get, kind of locked up, and you want to have visibility into how the business is executing for today so you can be building for tomorrow. It's you got to be, as a CRO, looking quarters and years ahead. Right now, I'm thinking about 2028, planning and where we want the org to be. And actually, we were just talking right before this call about 2030 and how do we build backwards?
Wow.
Are we moving fast enough? And based on where we think we can go, and because it's easy to just look to in front of you and not be raising your gaze a little bit in front of you. So I think that stuff's clear or key. Making sure your empowerment's clear in the organization as CRO. Again, if you want everything to come to you to solve the problems, go for it. But it's going to make life pretty hard. And so where can you empower decisions within the organization to get done? Where do you have drag? This is actually a big priority for us right now. Is we've been growing like crazy, hiring and customers. with all the best of intent as you grow, like you just create friction in the process. And we're trying to pull apart all the dozens and dozens of steps from, initial touch of a prospect to like the end of it. Like, why are there so many touch points? Why are we triplicating efforts? Because the amount you want your team focused with the customer and growing the business, not, filling out TPS reports, right? Like that part is real in any organization as you grow. And that means you got to put focus on your tech stack. Something I also learned here. When I got here, there was no ownership of the tech stack for sales. People were just buying procurement, things, and like none of this stuff was interoperable. Hardly any of the licenses were being used. People weren't seeing the value in it. Like, what a waste. So I actually have a dedicated couple folks that just are exploring the tech stack and AI capabilities in particular on right now to make sure those things are interoperable. Because the litmus test is a seller should say, like, there's no way I would have hit my goals if I didn't have the stack supporting me. And I think right now what you sometimes get is like, oh, that feels like another admin issue I got to go do, or like, why do I use it, or the education is there. It's like, that's again, that your job as a CRO is to create enablement and velocity in the org. And so that tech stack is actually a really critical component that gets overlooked. So you got to be making sure, those things are key. And, maybe like lastly is culture is always key in how you set up that organization. Because a winning team that's all in is going to do better than a team of similar number of people, similar technology, if the culture isn't there. And so like we try to spend a lot of time making sure the people that we bring in are going to be additive to that. Good vibes are contagious, as they say, like get that going. And we just did our all company meeting in Orlando a month or two ago. And like, I've never been in it. I've been at tons of big company events and I've never felt anything so real of the energy in that room of people that care. And so that's kind of sometimes our secret sauce is creating care in action. Like if you can do those two things, a lot's going to get done. If you don't really care and you're complacent, you're just going to go slow. And if it doesn't get done, don't care. So you have to reboot. You have to, let that be the bar that others want to lead to. And for those that don't want to, you have to make decisions on where do you, remove toxicity in the organization. And I think that's super important too. Like the longer you let that stuff fester, the slower you go.
Yep. You got to be the guardian of the culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's everybody creates it, right? Like, and I have culture club teams that are out there trying to drive it and get the real water cooler from the team. So we know what to work on, but we care about it. Like we want to go fix it. We put plans in place of what's not working well. And like, how do we go and fix it, quickly on those things. Don't let it sit there. Cause you know how things can spin up,
Sure.
if you don't tackle it.
And then, okay, so I'm bringing on a new CRO, maybe the first time. What would you say would be ways that you would want a CEO to be thinking about that role if they're going to bring into that organization? What's the right time and what should they be thinking about to ensure that CRO is successful?
Yeah, I think it depends on scale of the organization because I think a lot of CROs are sales leaders or VPs sales. And I always, actually, one of the things I push to my team is none of you are sales leaders, you're all business leaders. What that means is you have to think horizontally and again, not be selfish about just what your team's doing, but how you impact either. So find somebody that is a true business leader, not a super seller, that thinks about systems and organizational design and that cross-functional work. It's like, as soon as people start saying like that was marketing's problem or that was product's problem, like things are broken. Like we all collectively own it and you need to be in it and have those relationships. I mean, I spend a ton of my time with marketing, with legal, with all those things. Like as leaders, all those problems are your problems, right? Like it's not somebody else's problem. They're collectively our things to go solve. That's what you do as leaders. And so I think you got to make sure you find somebody that has ideally some diversity of maybe experiences in their career that has had to solve and look at these problems from different angles and be parts of them and has walked in the shoes of other functional roles. So they accept and have empathy of, what those folks are going through, but can also bring together the collective, thread through all that, but give them empowerment, let them run it. Like if you start to silo out the parts of the business, it's just going to go slower and you're going to have to spend time trying to do too much alignment across cross-functional peers. And if you have a good org, like I think you can still do that, but that's harder to find sometimes than if you just put the accountability within the CRO. Like sometimes marketing in some orgs can sit in this function. I actually don't think, at least for our company, it's the right thing. We have a very talented marketing team, but I have very tight alignment with our new CMO on what we do. And when I got here, that probably wasn't the case. We had different systems for tracking numbers. They said one thing, we said another, like, this is not working, right? Like we got to work together. So I think you got to make sure you find something that does think cross-functionally across those things, has operational and analytical, expertise, wants to go figure out how to build the go-to-market machine that moves as fast as possible and thinks about, I'm not thinking about any one deal in my job. Like I love hearing about the great deals and with the great customers, but like my job is for how do you accelerate the velocity and quantity of those things and make it easier. And then that the customer experience and all those is good. And so I think you just got to really test that CRO is more of that operator mentality, is in my opinion.
Gotcha. I completely agree. You got to find systems thinkers and you got to build a system. And you have to know how to deploy people to do that. I like the idea very much you just said about being a business leader as opposed to a sales leader. That's a really good, different context.
It's a different perspective.
It is.
Right?
It's great.
Like, you have to make decisions that are good for the business, and not. I think it's very easy to see. Unfortunately, maybe it's feels like selfishness in certain levels of sales because it goes back to like my commission check and my team as a sales leader.
Well, incentives are everything, right? I mean, end of the day, it's such a big part of it, and we can have a whole longer conversation about compensation plans and that kind of thing. But near the end of our time, but look, I really appreciate this. This is great, and it's always a pleasure to see chief revenue officers who are in the right job and doing the job properly because. I wouldn't be in business if everybody were in that situation, but it's great to see because it's an important role. And when it's done properly, it makes the biggest difference in the company. So thank you. So what are some ways people are you looking for? Who are you looking to speak to? What kind of people are you trying to connect with? And how can they find you?
I would say LinkedIn, but it's getting so backed up. I'm being probably not as good on LinkedIn responses as I would like. But I'm always, open. They can debate if I put my email in a podcast or not. That could be dangerous.
Sure call.
It's pretty easy to find with all those tools out there these days. It's pretty easy to find people. Zoom info. It's Christian Gerron at StackAdapt. Reach out if I can help. I think really the connection points that are important to me is talent. Like I'm spending most of my time identifying and trying to attract good talent. So I spend a lot of time interviewing right now because we're going to grow another couple hundred people on my team in the next 12 months. So how do I get the right leaders that can come in? And the good thing I would say is, because we've been growing and, I think maybe some of our competitors are having some more difficult times. There's a lot of folks at the door, which is an amazing privilege to have. And so we want to do everything we can to bring great talent in to feel what we feel every day and be part of that journey, and for our customers, that we're looking for out there, I hope that they will find what our others have found as they engage with us. I think we were an unknown entity, to many. When they called me up for the job, I'd never heard of the company, to be honest. And I was like, the last thing the world needs is another DSP. Like, I don't know, right? But I fell in love with the magic of the innovation and the culture, and where I was in my career. What mattered to me at this stage was about execution and about bold vision, about building great tech and going really quickly. And I think that's what you'll find here. And we want people that want to contribute to that culture positively. And so doors are open, and hopefully our customers will see that too. We just did one of our big customer events in Nashville last year, and it was probably the most rewarding thing I've seen from my customers is. We probably had 30% prospects in the room. My best sellers in the room those 3 days were our existing customers. They were like, awesome. You don't work with them? You're crazy. And like,
you turn your customers into salespeople, then you have a successful business. Matter of fact, I tell all my clients, your goal is to build a success team such that your customers become your sellers. That's the goal. If you can do that, then you got a good business going. That's great.
Yeah, and it was really fun to watch, and it's a testament to the great work the teams at StackAdapt have done, the sales teams, others, to build that relationship and rapport with them and that trust. And that's what we got to keep going as we grow. Like that's the most important thing is as you get bigger, it always gets harder, but maintaining that culture, how we operate, is like priority number one for me. And if we do that, good things will happen.
Well, thank you again. This is a great conversation. Really appreciate your time and your expertise. And I look forward to seeing you out there in the field. I have so many friends in this space who we both know, I'm sure a lot of them. So, but thanks. I really appreciate it. It was good to meet you. And I hope to see you like at some, programmatic IO event or something like that at some point.
That'd be great, Warren. Hey, I appreciate the time. It's always good. I listen to your show and it's fun to be a part of it. So thank you for having the opportunity to host me today.
100%. I'll speak to you again. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Warren. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the CRO Spotlight podcast. The CRO Collective's mission is to help CROs succeed and help founders and CEOs build CRO-ready organizations. You can find out more information about our services at thecrocollective.com. That's thecrocollective.com. And we look forward to having you join us next time.